Welcome back, everybody. We are live again, on fire, on a roll, and I'm pumped up for today's interview. I cannot wait to introduce my guest. Guys, if you are new to this podcast and listening to this for the first time, be sure to subscribe, turn on that notification so you know when incredible people like the one coming up are on this podcast. All right, my guest today is someone who is the embodiment of new age Middle East Jiu-Jitsu and the old school, authentic Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. His life was carved out by the impact of BJJ, and through his multiple achievements in the sport, he is now impacting BJJ itself right here in the Middle East. Bahraini Black Belt, multiple world title holder, the IBJJF World Champion. We are proud to have him in the Middle East. Please give it up for Ali Monfaradi. Thank you so much, Habibi, for doing this.
Well, after that introduction, I think we should just cap it there and just call it a podcast.
Let's do it. Let's do 3 clips out of that and we're done.
of the few podcasts I've done recently, this was by far the most awesome introduction. Like, I was listening to it and I was like, I want to meet that guy.
Let's go, man. Let's go. And I want to meet you, bro, because ever since I even mentioned that I'm going to be interviewing you, the amount of people that messaged me like, good job, good choice, finally, we need to hear from this guy. There's so much love out there for you in the jiu-jitsu community in general, not just the Middle East.
That's really humbling. It's the small connections you make, because I try to travel a lot. I try to be active. I try to meet people from different teams and stuff. Mm-hmm. And you just meet people, you make a connection with them. That's how I've always seen it. I almost always make friends with my opponents after the fight. Obviously, before the fights, you're cautiously checking each other out. But after that, we're all friends. We're all trying to do the same thing.
Man, I love that about jiu-jitsu. We have so much in common because of the journey itself that you can't hate somebody past the point of fighting them. Once you fight them, that's it. There's no more animosity.
It's just that I feel like some people take it way too seriously, or they take themselves way too seriously. I saw this clip a couple of days ago. I don't know if it was a new fight or an old fight, and they were doing no-gi, and I'm sure you've seen this. This guy, he just slaps him really hard, and it was like, it wasn't even a wrestling thing. It was an intentional slap because he got upset at something. And I'm like, dude, that's a human being who's playing under a rules format in a sport. He's not your enemy, and as a competitor, we have to sometimes put ourselves in the mindset of a more aggressive mindset, but never to the point of just being a plain douchebag,
Yeah, I think that's the problem is modern age jiu-jitsu has changed a lot from the old Bushido way of representing jiu-jitsu into, they realized from Conor McGregor and company that you need to add some animosity. You got to make an us versus them environment to really promote yourself these days, right?
Well, it's odd that you would mention Conor McGregor, because like Conor, he's his own brand. He started this whole, and then a few copycats tried to do his thing, but nobody does it quite as well as him.
No.
And I think the closest thing to that we have in jiu-jitsu is like Gordon, Gordon Ryan.
Exactly.
But I'm not of the mind where, because like in Brazil, they're not very big on trash talking. They always say jiu-jitsu is about respect, jiu-jitsu is about humility, jiu-jitsu is about that.
Right.
Sure, but first of all, there's like 2 different points I have to make. First of all, jiu-jitsu was not always about humility. It was not always about respect.
No, it wasn't.
The reason jiu-jitsu is a big thing now is because back in the 80s and 90s, people would visit these different dojos and beat them senseless. They would go to karate gyms, beat them up. They would go to whatever gyms, and there were all these like luta livre beach fights. And my own master, Fabio Gurgel, who was one of the pioneers of just running a successful, classy jiu-jitsu business, he said back in the 80s, we had to make a name for ourselves. There's this funny story he told me once about, it was like, he doesn't even remember the martial arts. He said it must have been like Aikido or whatever.
Okay.
And they went in on a Sunday into the academy. They had the keys for the academy. And it was Fabio and his friend, and it was 2 Aikido guys. So they go in, they didn't have the keys. So they had to hop in through the window.
Okay.
And Fabio's friend just eviscerated one of the Aikido guys. So now this guy has to fight Fabio, and he doesn't want to. So he tries to run away, but the doors are locked, and then they just they chase them down and they show them what's what. So no, jiu-jitsu wasn't based always on humility and respect. But I don't think that there's an innate need for us to be just very rude and just like really bring other people down.
Right.
People want to stand out. They always say, oh, trash talk brings money. No, no, no. Standing out brings money. So
Yes.
how do you stand out? Look at somebody like Keenan, right?
Mm-hmm.
Classy guy, very intelligent, nerdy, funny, and he runs a very, very successful internet marketing campaign.
Yes, that he does.
Yeah, so he doesn't need to resort to childish games. I think the part of the issue is that a lot of people come from very humble backgrounds.
Mm-hmm.
So they hesitate to just gonna be outspoken.
Right.
But also a huge issue is the language barrier. So the mainstream media is in English. So a lot of these Brazilians, they just want to, I'm here. This is my message. This is my game. I'll keep quiet. So yeah, I don't think trash talk is necessarily the way to go, but I do understand where one would be coming from.
That is a very well put response to that, because I think there's a lot of sides to this coin, funnily enough, is because the US media market, when it comes to the fight game, from Muhammad Ali all the way to today, in every different fight sport, it responds well to animosities. It responds well to this kind of trash talk. It's within the culture. But for example, if you were to trash talk in the Middle East, it would come off really wrong, right?
It would, wouldn't it?
Yeah, in the Middle East, it'll be terrifying. You'd be like, calm down, man. You don't want to pull off the wrong trigger here.
But I think it comes down to originality, because if we're doing it in the Middle East, if I do it, I'm immediately going to be the Middle Eastern wannabe Conor McGregor. That's the last thing I want to be,
Because it's not within our culture, like, to call out and to do that kind of shit. It's obvious you're trying hard. Yeah, and I think Brazil kind of has a similar culture, aside from the fact that Brazil created this martial art and luta libre.
Yeah, it's just that, like you said, it's very cultural. So if you just, go 200 kilometers down the map, from North America to South America, they did things very differently, Their trash talk was usually like bare-knuckled underground fights,
Yeah, they spoke with their fists.
I don't know what they call it. There used to be this thing, like, shortly before the UFC, it was like a half octagon. So it would be like a cage, and the remaining barrier would be a concrete wall.
Oh shit!
And the concrete wall was fair game, and these were like.
Wait, what do you mean by fair game? Like smack his head against it?
Oh yeah. Like hit them in the crotch, bite them.
Damn.
They would just they would throw you in a cage, and this
throw in a pit bull.
Yeah. And this was obviously super illegal. But again, this is, part of what got jiu-jitsu out there. Then the UFC came about, and the rest, as I say, is history.
My God, man, what a terrifying background. Like, most people, they're like, wow, Brazil, capoeira, BJJ, and interesting that the culture diversity. It's not just culture diversity, it's man killers. They live a rough life, and in order to survive that rough life, they need this kind of crazy self-defense system, right? It's not like living in Bahrain or the UAE, just chilling on the beach.
Like, hearing all these stories, I even used to tell Fabio, I was like, man, to have been doing jiu-jitsu during your time, you must have really liked it.
Yeah, man.
Because part of what we're trying to do, and we'll get into this a lot when we speak about Elements, but part of what we're trying to do at Elements is making jiu-jitsu as accessible as possible to any individual.
Okay.
So we're trying to stray away from that animosity. We're trying to stray away from, get out of my gym, you're not animalistic enough, and all of that stuff, So
no brick walls.
Obviously, I, as somebody who really loves jiu-jitsu and fell in love with it, and trying to make it more accessible to as many people as possible. That's just not how it used to be. I do not understand how in the 90s and early 2000s, somebody would just walk into a gym, start rolling with everybody from their first day, and eventually become a high-level black belt. Imagine that there was no structure, there was no special treatment. You would go in from your first day, you would be treated like dirt. You would be like I think when I arrived in Brazil, I was at the back end of that generation. It was just about fading away. The whole, white and blue belts clean the mats, purple belts clean the bathrooms, or whatever.
Yeah.
But you must have really loved jiu-jitsu to have trained back in the day, is my point.
And I'd imagine that if jiu-jitsu was taught the way it's being taught today back then we'd have a lot more people training jiu-jitsu today.
Yeah, but as they say, كل تأخيرة فيها خيرة.
Yes,
so perhaps,
absolutely.
Yeah, so perhaps
every delay has a blessing.
Yeah, so perhaps jiu-jitsu having gone through that phase is what got it into the UFC and
Sure.
blah, 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 blah.
It was desperate to get known because it wasn't growing fast enough because of that mindset, right? Probably.
If
You're
jiu-jitsu,
absolutely
yeah,
right.
if jiu-jitsu was commercial during the 90s, it was like
Oh, yeah.
super commercial,
Yeah.
it wouldn't have proven itself.
Yeah, 100%. So Ali, I take a look back at your like educational background, and it's very fascinating because I like as I was reading some of your backstory, I'm like Ali the computer specialist, Ali the software engineer, Ali the nutritionist, because like it just doesn't click well with what you've become. Because now Ali the electric chair sounds a little bit better to me, or the black belt, and for a better reason, the electric chair than the one that
Yeah.
was made. What was the story behind the electric chair?
So now I like to pretend that, you know, it's because I'm some kind of executioner or something, but it was not that. I was just
Exactly.
very clumsy, very spazzy, flexible, you know, but with no real control over my
What
belt.
the fuck?
You know, so
shit.
like when people would train with me, they would very regularly, like they're training me, they're trying to pass them, like a foot hits them in the face, you know?
Damn.
So they call me the electric chair because rolling with me was like rolling with somebody who's being electrocuted the whole time.
I love it. Man, that, for a guy to be just sitting down for the last 10 minutes talking on a podcast and then just randomly pulling their foot to their head, that's flexibility, bro. I would probably snap my spine right now if I did that.
Yeah, I don't recommend to go from zero to this point right away.
Exactly. But that's the thing. Like, I know this is the origin of the Cadera Eléctrico name that they gave you, but I actually watched a lot of the matches that you've done, a lot of the fights, and you are a fucking electric chair because the way you scramble and get to the back looks like an electric chair, bro. It's fantastic.
I had a friend, he's Canadian, and he used to say, Ali, you have really good cardio. You have great cardio, but it's not athletic cardio, it's sloppy cardio. So like
Oh.
you're just throwing your body around and then you land in the right position. I was like, okay, it works, right?
Oh, fuck it, man. I landed there. That's it.
But that stuck with me, sloppy cardio.
I wanted to really get into something because obviously before this podcast and me and you finding each other on Instagram, I didn't know you very well. And just like many guests, I'm so happy to learn of the backstories and the diverse backgrounds that we have in the region already. You come from an extremely unique one, whereas you have the Middle East and you have Brazil. And I can't wait to learn from these experiences. Where did it all start for you when it comes to jiu-jitsu?
Well, back in the day, the jiu-jitsu scene wasn't quite what it was. And jiu-jitsu was basically non-existent in Bahrain.
Okay.
And for as long as I could remember, I wanted to start training because the rest of my family trained, but there was no kids class. I was a kid. So the moment they started training kids, I was about 12, I started training, and then I never stopped since. And I remember that first kids class had 6 boys. One of them, he moved out of Bahrain. I don't know how he's doing.
Okay.
One of them was me, obviously. One of them was my brother, who's a brown belt now.
Nice.
One of them is, his name is Abdallah. He's a student of mine. He's a blue belt now. And the remaining 2 are my cousins. And they only rediscovered jiu-jitsu about a year and a half ago. And today they're also blue belts under me.
So you and potentially the mystery 6th are the only ones that really stuck with jiu-jitsu.
I guess you could say that. And it's funny because with the exception of that one kid who's not in Bahrain anymore, who I don't know what he's doing, everybody's still training jiu-jitsu.
Amazing. Yeah, they all finally found their way back to it eventually. I like that.
Yeah.
And when did jiu-jitsu get to Bahrain? Because I feel like Bahrain got it quite early in comparison to other Arabic countries. Like when did it first appear?
I understand that my uncle came back from the States around 2000 and he started training with my dad, just like, you know, moving around. And then eventually it became a training group. Eventually it became a jiu-jitsu school.
Interesting.
And then from there, you know, it started spreading out more and more.
So it seems to be that 2000 was Sinat Khair al Middle East because 99 UAE, 2000 Bahrain, and I think 2000 as well, Jordan. These are the first 3 places I recognize that
it was the Renaissance era.
Fantastic, man. What an amazing fucking year. Y2K from hell.
Yeah.
And so you started jiu-jitsu as a kid. Was it because you had family that do it, or did you genuinely like it? You were attracted to jiu-jitsu?
It's hard to draw a line and like make a distinction. I wanted to do it, because it was there in my face,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and obviously like any other kid, you know, you want to learn how to fight, you want to learn how to defend yourself. You grew up on movies like uh Karate Kid and
Yes.
Bruce Lee and all of that good stuff.
Yes.
So yeah, I feel like the decision was never made. I think it
Mm.
was just kind of in the background the whole time.
And it wasn't because like they weren't allowing kids to train that you wanted to train, and then they just opened it up, and you're like, I gotta take advantage. It wasn't like that.
No, it was just the natural progression, you know, and
Very
it's
cool.
yeah, and like people always ask me, like, you know, if you could redo or if you regret one thing, I
Mm.
wouldn't call it a regret, but if I could reformulate the world, I would have had jiu-jitsu in Bahrain earlier, so I could have started earlier. But I
Oh
literally
man.
started as at the earliest date possible,
It,
January 6th, 2006.
oh man, that's early. That's very early
Yeah,
because
yeah,
that's the
I've been
thing. Like
around. It's been
you say that about your jiu-jitsu journey. I would say the same, but it wouldn't apply because jiu-jitsu was around before I started, and I got exposed to jiu-jitsu twice before finally starting. And I hit myself on the head so much, but I think it came to me at the right time. But the first two times I was approached with jiu-jitsu, one of them was a girl that I knew in university, and she was very much like an out there cool girl, likes wrestling, likes WWE. So like I associated jiu-jitsu from her as WWE, and she started
I
talking shit like
see.
guillotine, triangle chokes. I'm like, oh fuck this, and I never got into it, and I stuck to boxing, and then until one guy kicked my ass royally that does jiu-jitsu, that I like, okay, fuck this. I threw up my boxing gloves. I'm like, I gotta do this martial art. It comes at the right time in your life, I believe.
Yeah, yeah, like all other things, right?
Yes, yes.
But but did you feel that there was a point where, because I think everybody had this,
Hmm.
did you feel there was a point where you were like, yep, this is for me. I do not care about anything else. When did that come
Yes.
for you?
When I first trained with a guy, at that point, I was physically, maybe at the best physical part of my life. I was shredded. I was bodybuilding, weightlifting. I felt super strong. And then here comes this kid. I was 24, 25 when I started, and this guy is 16, half my weight, diabetic,
Oh
okay?
no.
Super weak guy. Tapped me out
Yeah.
3 times. I just didn't know what the fuck was going on. And it was like glue, and he triangle choked me, and then he omoplated me, and my shoulders were so stiff, I felt like shit. Right then and there, I swore. I went back, my fiance at that time, and I just told her, I'm like, this is it. I found that thing that'll make me really happy if I go and pursue it. And I stuck to it since. I did not even waver.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
It's
man.
it's it's awesome because everybody has that moment, you know, when
Yes,
and it usually involves getting beat up by somebody very physically inferior to you, and
it
then
does,
you're like, yep,
unfortunately.
yeah,
But with you, it wasn't so much that. It was just starting out with the kids and like feeling the BJJ
yeah.
lifestyle, that environment, right?
Yeah, but of course, when I was 13, I was
Hmm.
transitioned to the adult class.
Okay.
And then it was just like a couple of years of being everybody's warm-up round.
Whoa.
And like to this day, I have a couple of students who are purple and brown. And
Mm-hmm.
they always joke about how once upon a time I was their warm-up round, but they're my warm-up round now. And
Nice. The
and
tables
when I
turned.
was yeah, when I was 14, the jiu-jitsu scene, we're talking like 2008, you know? So there
Mm.
were no AJP, there was no actual UAE you
Sah.
know, there
Yeah.
were local UAE tournaments and there were no kids categories, there were no juvenile
Right.
categories, none of that. So
Right.
I was thrown straight into the adult categories. And at the time, it was white and blue together. So, you know, needless to say, I
Mm.
kept striking out first round every tournament I went into. It was frustrating because I felt like I wasn't even benefiting because I would go and I was so nervous and I would
Wow.
just go and tap, you know?
Mm.
And this kept happening until my fifth tournament. Like I would
Okay.
either lose my first round or lose my second round. My fifth tournament ever, I was a green belt and it was the white and blue belt category of the very first World Pro, 2009.
Okay.
And I think a few weeks before that, Jiu-Jitsu finally started clicking for me. And I discovered like half guard or deep half guard at the time. And that was my
Interesting.
winning game. And I think I won 4 or 5 matches and I made it to a semifinal, and then I lost my semifinal to Vitor Silveiro. He was a blue belt at the time. And my very first medal ever was a World Pro Bronze, and what was at the time white and blue together.
And that's an impressive event, right? You felt the professionalism, you felt like the potential of jiu-jitsu from it, right?
Yeah, and like this is a 15-year-old in 2008. I've never seen anything like that in my life.
Crazy.
Because before that event, all these people I saw, like Cobrinha was there, Fabio Gurgel was there, Marcelo Garcia was there, Michael Langhi, Rafael Mendes, Guilherme Mendes. And I think because it was the first edition, a lot of them got special invitations. Braulio Stima, Demente, so many people were there. And for me, I was like, wow, these are the people from the magazines. These are the people from the YouTube. And Hollywood. They're all here. Yeah, and I remember because when Fabio gave me my black belt, he brought up this story because it's the most hilarious story ever. Okay. Me and my friend, we were such fanboys because we didn't know that jiu-jitsu at the time. We didn't know that jiu-jitsu was a sport where, you know, everybody's cool. You can just go to whoever's academy and train with them and roll with them. To us, we were, you know, normal people, and these people were Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, you know.
Oh, yeah.
So these were very inaccessible people. So as the fanboy that I was, I went to Michael Langhi or Cobrinha. I think it was one of them.
Okay.
And we were like, I want your gi, the one you just sweated in.
Oh, wow.
And I think the market price for the gi was like $180.
Okay.
And Michael was like, okay, how about $180? I was like, what? $180 for a gi that you sweated in, that you used? That's an amazing deal.
Hell yeah, man.
You have this historic gi.
You got it pissed cheap, bro. Today it'd be worth triple.
And yeah. And Fabio and Cobrinha were in on it, and they're like, wow, that's such a good deal, blah, 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 blah. And yeah. And it was actually my friend who was buying it. I was like negotiating for him. And I thought I got on such a killer deal, you know, paying a premium retail price for a used, old,
abused gi.
And yeah, so I guess Fabio, that stuck with Fabio because at the time I wasn't a student. I didn't know him. I was some green belt. And then it was hilarious that you remember that when he gave me my black belt.
That's a hilarious story for him to be like, oh, you were that guy when you went to him in Brazil. What a situation, man. So I want to return the question back to you before we get to this incredible journey that you had in Brazil. You asked me, when did I know if, this is it for me? When did you know this was it for you? Like, when did you feel jiu-jitsu has the potential of being my life?
Well, like I said before, there was never a conscious decision, you know. It was always, I'm going to do this. I have to do this, but I will do this. Mm-hmm. But I never knew what I was doing when I was younger, you know.
Right.
And, you know, I never thought there was a chance of me ever becoming, you know, a world-class athlete, fighting with, you know, world-class people.
Sure.
And yeah, I think around that time where I got bronze at World Pro, and like there was no flow grappling at the time, but I think it was Gracie Mag and Jiu Jitsu Magazine. Like they did a smart piece on me, and they were like, "This kid is up and coming. You know, this kid is gonna make it happen." And I remember when I lost my semifinal to Vitor Silveiro, it was Zemario Sperry. Was it Zemario Sperry? It was somebody of that year. I think it was Mario Sperry.
Okay.
And he just pointed at the match, and he was like, "That kid is gonna become a killer someday." And
whoa.
And believe it or not, I didn't believe him. I was like, no, he doesn't know what he's talking about. But yeah.
That was your first reaction to that?
Yeah, I was like, yeah, he doesn't know what he's talking about. He doesn't train with me. He doesn't see that I'm everybody's warm-up round. He made a mistake. But after that World Pro, the medal just kept coming, you know, and I really found my groove. I found my game.
Was it in 16. Half guard at that time?
No, then it started developing, you know.
Okay.
When I was younger, I was all about the open guard. Okay. And again, open guard, but also, you know, that sloppy cardio, just moving around and getting whatever you can get, you know.
Sure.
But yeah, then I turned 16, started getting more confident, started talking to girls, started getting more fit.
Nice.
And yeah, and then, you know, when I saw that girls found this impressive, I was like, okay, then
let's
I
go.
This is what I'm doing.
Time to go professional.
In the end, and correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay.
Everything we do in life, everything,
Hmm.
everything, everything, every accomplishment, every every field you specialize in, every drive you have, it somehow comes back to a girl or girls, you know? Like,
Interesting. Very interesting.
I feel like it does, you know? It obviously
Well,
it developed into something else later
I, I
on,
I
but
think you're onto something very big there because it depends again on your family dynamic. But most men, their first girl, their first love is their mother, right? So and the impressment of their mother goes a long way. So yes, for the first portion of your life before hormones kick in, all right, mommy's that girl. And
yeah.
then when hormones kick in and testosterone takes over, then yes, it becomes a big motivator. A lot of guys get into sports, fitness. I usually find it that most guys end up becoming beasts after a bad breakup rather than a very good relationship.
Kind of disturbing when you put it that way, don't you think?
Yeah, man. Yeah, that's the thing. It takes, honestly, when it comes to jiu-jitsu, we can talk about this because we live in this culture and we meet people around it. It takes a unique individual to go through the pain, the injuries, the shit that you go through to level up. That's why there's a big dropout rate by blue belt. It takes a special kind of person, and whether it's motivation through women, whether it's motivation through hardships, for me it was, and we talked a little bit about this before getting to the podcast, my back. It's a big story for me. I had a spine surgery at 15 where
Oh no.
they had to fuse my vertebrae, and one of my nerves on my right leg malfunctions, so I have a smaller right leg than a left leg. um, they
That's
told me
tough,
I
bro.
Yeah, man. But they told me I couldn't do anything. They told me I couldn't run, I couldn't do this and that. And now I'm doing jujitsu. I'm training with everybody. I compete perfectly fine. It just becomes that thing that you want to prove against the world. So whether you want to prove you're good enough, whether you want to prove that you can still do it, you're not handicapped in something, you have to find that reason in jujitsu, right?
Uh, it's one of the more difficult topics to talk about because I think we all have that kind of cornerstone
Yes.
to come back to, you know. For you, obviously, it's that. For me, it's probably, you know, just getting my ass handed to me, getting bullied so terribly in school, you
Okay.
know. And it's it's funny, you know. You think you do jujitsu,
Mm-hmm.
and you know you learn how to defend yourself, and then you defend yourself, and then you start developing your character. For me, it wasn't that.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I was such a shy kid that lacked confidence, that lacked self-esteem.
Mm-hmm.
When jiu-jitsu started entering my life in a meaningful way, I became much more confident. I became so chill, so
Mm-hmm.
comfortable in my own skin that it started
Amazing.
becoming very difficult to get into a confrontation with me. It's
Yes.
not that I it's not that I particularly needed to start defending myself, but that I developed because of jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
And to this day, it's difficult for somebody to get into a fist fight with me. You know,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, you know, we all have something of a temper, you know, and all,
Sure.
but
Sure.
yeah, like if somebody is just being like like let's say somebody's drunk or somebody is just being very just
Obnoxious.
irresponsible, you know,
Yeah.
I'm comfortable enough to know that I have the skill set to murder him, and
Yeah.
I am choosing not to. I am
Yeah.
beyond this. You know, it
Yeah.
sounds pretentious, but jujitsu gives that to you. It gives you the tools,
Yeah.
and then it's up to you whether or not you want to use those tools responsibly.
Yeah. I like this quote. It says, if you are incapable of violence, you are not peaceful, you're harmless. And this is
You
something I
are
really enjoy.
incapable
Of
of
violence,
violence
you're not peaceful, you're harmless. So most people, what happens is that they say, I don't like to fight, I'm a peaceful kind of guy. You're not peaceful, you're harmless. The
you just
person
don't
who
have that
can
option.
No, you don't. A person who trains jiu-jitsu is a black belt, has trained hundreds and hundreds of people how to fight, and has tapped hundreds of body types for the last 15 years. When you go up to him in a bar and push him or bump into him and he chooses not to annihilate you, that's a peaceful man. You are a harmless idiot because you have not been humbled and you have not been in an encounterment with a violent man, right? To really understand this. And I think you hit the nail on the head because the real joy and amazing part of jiu-jitsu, especially in younger kids, is fighting is not about can I do it or not. It's once you know what you're capable of, you don't need to prove it, and therefore the fight is not required anymore. Fights happen when you need to prove something. If two idiots don't know what they can and can't do, and they feel the necessity to prove it to a person who means nothing to them in their lives, that's when shit hits the fan and somebody gets elbowed and hits the curb and dies. That's pretty much the story.
Unfortunately, that is the case, and we are unfortunately seeing that more and more nowadays, you know?
Exactly, yes. Yeah, and I think the more people like you, like me, for whatever reason that start jiu-jitsu, especially the kids, man. Like when I see the Middle East, you grew up in Bahrain, I grew up in the UAE. Our generation growing up was Wild West, bro. Wild West, Tupac, Shakur, Biggie, like that kind of mentality. And we didn't have anything to cling to be confident. We had to show off confidence. Like a lot of my generation was pretty much, you're either a total introvert or you had to show up in some way. Now you look at the kids, they're all like Harry Potter, their favorite cartoons, their favorite stuff, their favorite anime. They don't give a shit. Why? Because they'll strangle you if you say anything, you know? And I love it.
I also think there's a cultural shift. Not that bullying has diminished in any way. I think it's still a huge issue. But I think, you know, embracing, you know, your quirky personality or being a nerd or a geek is somewhat more celebrated today just because it is so much more mainstream.
Yes.
Whereas back in our day, can't believe I'm at the age where I get to say back in our day, but back in our day, we were the weirdos who liked that weird stuff, you know?
Yes. Absolutely, man. And that's the thing. Like, I feel like jiu-jitsu really was that big brother for this generation of introverts. Our generation of introverts really like flocked to jiu-jitsu and a given personality for me later in life. But it does have that blessing that is non-confrontational, non-physical, as you said. Did you have idols growing up, like 13, 14, starting to compete, getting bronze medal? Did you be like somebody, Fabio Gurgel? Was it somebody else?
I think my first, like I'm talking about a girl or something.
Here we go again.
Because in 2005, Marcelo Garcia came to give a seminar in Bahrain. And obviously I didn't train at the time. But to me, it's funny, you know, I was fortunate that my first major figure or influence was Marcelo Garcia. And as fate would have it, he went on to become the greatest of all time, arguably speaking. But it was definitely him. Like, even before I knew what jiu-jitsu was, I was like, Marcelo Garcia, Marcelo Garcia, Marcelo Garcia. And then as I started discovering my own game, it was all about what Marcelo was doing. And then it's such a shame that when I got my first IBJJF World Championship medal, which was a bronze in 2011, that was his last year competing. I guess it's not a shame. I was fortunate to compete in the same event as him.
Sure.
But yeah, that was the last time. And after that, he obviously retired.
What was it that drew you to him? Was it his personality or his jiu-jitsu? More.
Well, before I started, it was just that huge smile, you know?
Yeah.
Again, I was a kid, so bear with me. It was a huge smile and his unnaturally humongous calf muscles. They were like...
Man, yes!
Yeah.
Holy shit, yes! You know? Fuck yeah, man. Listen, we're all men here. We're all grown-ass men. They're fucking impressive calves, man, for his size.
No wonder he loved using butterfly guard. I'd use butterfly guard if I had tree trunks for feet.
Holy shit. Everybody's like, man, how is he so small and capable of doing this? Did you see his fucking calves? The guy will butcher you with them.
Yeah. But then, when I was a blue belt, you know, I started mimicking his game and then watching like his old school fights with like Damian Maya and Jacare and Hodger Gracie, and I saw what he was doing with X Guard, and then that started what was my, you know, my modern game.
So he got you to be technical.
Well, as a weak 13-year-old who was everybody's warm-up round, I always had to resort to technique. I think to this day, I'm not necessarily the most physically superior guy in the category, you know? And I work really hard. Like I wake up, you know, to do my strength and conditioning training before the academy even opens. But yeah, you know, like I understand my limitations and that's not really my thing. I'm never going to be the most physically imposing guy. And that's what's beautiful about jiu-jitsu, you know?
Yes.
If judo was my sport, a sport that, you know, requires a lot of athleticism, a lot of explosiveness, perhaps I would not have, you know, gained what success I've gained in jiu-jitsu. Because in jiu-jitsu, you can always adapt. You can always work around things, you know, like we talked about injuries, you know, for years, you know, I dealt with back pain, not to the point of surgery like yourself, but it did involve adaptation. It did involve like, okay, if my legs get spread open, I'm going to be in so much pain, I'm going to tap. So let's work on the half guard. Let's
I
work on
see.
pressure passing. Let's, so to me, it's not like anybody wants to be injured. I wouldn't wish it upon anybody. But
Yeah.
when you are injured, it presents a very unique opportunity to refine certain techniques you certainly wouldn't
Yes.
have refined.
So true. Yes. I found most of my, let's say, leveling up in jiu-jitsu came after injuries because I was forced not to use something that I relied on. And most injuries come because of strength. When you try to be an idiot and power through something, that's when you get injured in jiu-jitsu. So most of my injuries would happen around my shoulders, would happen around my ribs, because that's when I'm pushing an immovable weight and I'm trying to just use brute strength. So what would happen is I can no longer push anymore, and it forced me to wedge rather than push. It started forcing me to start using my joints, my knee, bring it into their hips, things like that. And that's when, like you say, things start to click. Brilliant point.
What kind of game did you find yourself implementing now that you are adapting to this?
So in the beginning, I tried to take advantage of my long legs and limbs. I was like De La Hiva, trying to get people off balance, and I'm always diagonal. I don't like to be in front of people because I have the problem with my right leg. And when people have a strong push ability, I don't. So I need to go in at an angle at somebody and make them post on their hands. That's the best way for me to attack. So I started developing this diagonal game, going to a single leg, using their lapel to create a diagonal force on their body. Anything diagonal works for me. If it's face to face, I'm in trouble. If I get flattened out, I'm in big trouble. Yeah, but I mean, I had to adapt my game towards my injuries rather than towards whatever preference I have. I think that's what happens the most. Yeah. And with back pain, so we were talking about this before. What did you do to overcome this? Because you didn't do surgery.
Yeah, trust me, I've considered it. It's just that I know that if you talk to anybody who's like,
Yeah.
well acclaimed, in their opinion, whether it's in physical therapy or high level sports, they'll always say, don't go for the intervention, don't go for the surgery, especially if it's your spine.
100%.
But it reached a point where it was just so frustrating. I'm seeing all these chiropractors, all of these physical therapists, all of these strength trainers, and it just kept coming and going, and it was the worst pain I've had. Like I've either had to not compete, or
Right.
I would have to compete despite of it. And
Would it be sciatic pain, like shooting down to the legs?
at one point it was, and
Okay.
that because I had a couple of slip discs, maybe even more by now, God knows. But at
Sure.
one point it was that. But I remember it was 2016 or 17, 17 probably. It was brown belt world pro, and it was a stacked category. It was a stacked category, and I actually, as fate would have it, I had a very, I don't want to say easy, but a very fortunate bracket.
Okay.
I probably had to beat the best guy at the very end, and I had this how do I put this rightly? I don't want to say B tier because that sounds very mean. Let's say an average guy. I had an average, not world-class guy in my first fight.
Okay.
And I didn't prepare very well for this tournament. I mean, I did the best I could. Actually, I had a really good season. I won Abu Dhabi Grand Slam. I won London Grand Slam, but I was just not having it before World Pro. My back was completely out of it.
Okay.
So I fight this guy in my first fight, and I was just not able to exert any force. And every time I tried to lift him, I would feel like this shooting pain in my back.
Oh, man.
And I guess I wasn't in the zone, so maybe burned out, and he beat me. And I was like, man, you had such a great season. You had such a good bracket, and you lost that first fight. And then I remember who it was. I think it was somebody from the academy or my dad or whatever. I texted them and I said, I'm not going to do the bronze medal bracket. I'm just, because they just introduced the bronze medal bracket at that time. And if you don't know, the bronze medal bracket is a nightmare because pretty much every person who lost is going to go into that to fight even more fights.
Yes.
To eventually get the consolation prize that is the bronze medal. And bronze at the World Championship is a big deal. But, I was in the right mindset.
Sure.
I'm not going to do it. And then I look at the screen and there were like 6 levels left till the bronze match, you know? And I was
Okay.
like, I remember because I was fighting to get ranked. So you get prizes if you're like ranked in the top 3, right?
Okay.
And I already secured my prize as the no-gi athlete. I think I got 3rd place. And I was very close to ranking in the top 3 in the gi.
Mm.
And the way the UAJJF works is that even if you don't get a medal, if I end up in the top 16, I'll get a certain amount of points. If I end up in
Okay.
the top 8, I'll get even more points. So I was like, I don't even have to win. I just need to
Mm.
get as close as possible to securing my points. So I was
Okay.
like, let's take this one fight at a time. Oh, I'm fighting this dude from Atos. Great, let's do this. I don't care what comes next. So
Nice.
he didn't show up.
Oh,
And then I had
wow.
5 more. And then I had 5 more fights. And then I had a really tough guy. He's now a high-level black belt in my first bronze medal. No, sorry, my first bronze medal fight, as fate will have it, was the guy who beat me in my first fight.
Oh.
And I went in with anger. Like, I think I lost on one advantage
Oh, shit.
to
Okay.
him. But then in the bronze medal fight, I think I passed his guard 3 times. I was just so angry, you know?
Interesting, man.
Yeah.
Interesting how
So
in the
then I
same
beat
day
him.
the same two guys fight differently. Yeah.
Yeah. And then so I beat him, and I'm like, man, couldn't you have done that in the first fight? But whatever, you know? We're taking this
Okay.
one step at a time.
Yeah.
And I still didn't have the mindset of winning anything. I was just like, let's just take it one step at a time. Let's just enjoy it, you know?
Okay.
And that day, I fought Max Lindbald, Dante Leon, Ricky from Noguera Brothers. No, I think that was in a different event. I fought
Okay.
another guy from Atos.
Okay.
And in my last bronze medal fight, I fought Servio Tullio from Gracie Baja. So that was one of the most amazing brackets. And to this day, I say that bronze medal bracket is worth more than any gold medal bracket I could have hoped for.
That was a stacked bronze medal.
Yeah. And yeah, I think on that event or a different, I think it was on that event. I even fought Craig Jones back when he played with Big E.
Wow.
And so anyway, so eventually this back thing never stopped, you know, and it's really hindered. But as I told you before we started filming, I think, you know, some people tell you it's glutes, some people tell you it's core, some people tell you it's flexibility, some people tell you it's inflammation, nutrition, so many different angles. But in the end, I discovered that for myself, and I think this would help a lot of people, the best way to deal with a back injury, the kind of injury that debilitates you, is pretending that it's not there. Not ignoring the problem, but allowing your body to move as it normally would. When you tell yourself you're injured, you're going to be a robot the whole day, you know?
You're
just
tense.
going to protect yourself so much, stiffen up, you know, spaz out your spine, and that's not going to do you any good, you know?
True.
So when you allow your body to understand, oh, wait, I'm elongating. Okay, so that's okay. You tell your body it's okay. This you don't need to feel pain for. So my advice for anybody who's dealing with chronic back pain, and this should go with a disclaimer, consult a doctor first or whatever, but act as you normally would. Allow your body to experience the movements that a normal spine would, and your body will work with you. Your body is an amazing mechanism. Your body is constantly trying to work for you. It's your mind that might not be. So you need to 100%. Kind of synchronize those two.
100%, man. And this is something that I learned throughout a lifetime suffering with this. Since the age of 13, I suffered from back pain. And I was fortunate later, after all my surgeries and spinal fusions, I met a person who was very wise with it. And this is advice also to people listening and to you. You do not do a spine surgery unless you fell out of a helicopter in a ski trip or got hit by a motorcycle or a car. You do not do a spine surgery. 90% of spine pain is mental, 10% is physical. Because we associate in pop culture and common culture back pain. Everybody and their mother has back pain, right? So we associate it with certain movements. And then if we feel something like, oh shit, and then you mentally lock up your back, you know full and well as a martial artist, as an athlete, that your brain controls your body 100%. And you could make yourself fatigue, You could make yourself adrenaline dump. You could make yourself feel fucking fantastic. And science hasn't caught up to this yet fully. We don't know the mechanism. We know it's true. So just like you hit the nail on the head with that, pretending and actually mentally acknowledging like that the brain can cause back pain relieves back pain, because you're like, so the way I'm thinking does affect me. So just realize that, and that alone will reduce your back pain by half at least.
I think
like
also,
that.
you know, we're so susceptible to suggestion, you know. You know, you go to a doctor, and the doctor, by all means, he may not be an expert with your particular issue, you know, but it is in his practice to tell you that surgery is an option, and then you just keep hearing surgery.
100%.
And you know, now that I'm sitting in front of you, I can so confidently agree with you. Yeah, you know, surgery should be a last resort. But when I was in the thick of it in 2016, 2017, and I was finding no solution, I was almost tearing up, and I was like, okay, just get a knife in there and cut out whatever the problem is, you know?
That's what happened with me. Yeah. That's exactly what happened. My parents were terrified. And obviously my parents, God bless them, back then there was not that much science with spine in the UAE. And they saw their kid in immense pain at 13, 14. And they're like, definitely this is something's wrong with him. But for me, it was, yes, there's definitely a mechanical issue that led to it, but it could have been handled with decompression, with physio. But it is definitely a huge thing when doctors that don't train martial arts, that don't do sports, start giving you advice. That's the blessing of today. You can go to New York, you can go to many countries where there's doctors that their job is for athletes, and putting them under the knife is the last thing they want to do.
Yeah, I'd have to agree.
So I wanted to get into the part that I'm really excited to talk to you. You graduate high school, and instead of attending your graduation ceremony, you go and compete. All right. I love that about your story. That just shows how committed you were. And then right after that, you go straight to Sao Paulo, Brazil, and decide to live there. Is that the correct chronology of this?
The decision came about a month and a half or 2 months before, actually.
Okay.
Up until then, I was always of the mind that I'm a good student and I'm doing jiu-jitsu. I'm going to pursue my education, and I'm going to have jiu-jitsu as a major part of my life.
Okay.
And it was always either study in Bahrain or study abroad. And we didn't have the money to send me abroad. And as fate would have it, I wasn't scholarship tier. So we came to the decision that I would stay in Bahrain, you know, out of necessity, but also because I would be in the comfort of my hometown, able to train jiu-jitsu as much as possible. So it was a jiu-jitsu based decision. And my father supported it. My father, one of my biggest influences, and obviously a black belt in jiu-jitsu. So he was a huge advocate of that plan. Funny enough, the suggestion came from my mother, who, you know, God bless her soul, but she didn't know anything about jiu-jitsu or, you know, what the scene was like or whatever. And she just said, if you like jiu-jitsu so much, why don't you go to Brazil? And my And my response was, well, first of all, isn't it too expensive? And then we discovered that no, it would be, you know, quite affordable, especially, we'll get into this later, the lifestyle I had there. But, But I said, well, probably, you know, you'd have to study in their language, you know? And she said, do you know that for a fact? Maybe you can go to an American university in Brazil. I was like, well, that's quite the loophole. I could do that. So the idea got cemented in my mind. It was there. And by the time I discovered that, no, there's no such thing as in English education in Brazil, I've already made up my mind. I was like, no matter what, I'm going to Brazil and I'm going to go through this and I'm going to do it.
You're already on the beach.
So we go to that fateful World Championship, and obviously all of Team Alliance was there. And it was a good send-off for me, because training out of Bahrain as a 17-year-old, I got bronze. I lost my semi-final match to Michael Lera Jr. And I had 6 fights that day, and it was a huge accomplishment for me. And it was like, again, I went in with no expectations. I've never fought at that platform before. But then, you know, I was like, all right, I'm third in the world. I'm going to go to Brazil, and very naturally, I'm going to become first in the world. That's just mathematics, you know? So I go to Fabio, and he was there. And at this point in time, I've known him from a seminar and from a gi purchase, the one we spoke about.
The smelly gi. Yes.
Yeah. And he knew that I was going to come in and move in there and stuff. And he
Okay.
told me, so what's your plan? I said, well, I'm going to come. And there's going to be a 6-month gap before university start in Brazil, because the the season in Brazil
Wow.
starts in January and not in September or February, I
Okay.
think. So I was like, so that's my loophole. I'm going to come in 6 months, learn the language, pass my entrance exam, and get into university and do jiu-jitsu for life. And he was like, whoa, well, good. And he said this. He said, well, good luck with that.
Damn.
Yeah,
That's a
and
tall order.
yeah, but I was such an arrogant 17-year-old. I was like,
I love
it's
it.
okay, he doesn't know. He doesn't know. I'm gonna do this.
Nice.
And I
Okay.
go to Brazil, and very quickly I discovered that Portuguese is a very, very difficult language. And I think for the first 3 months, I had an instructor, like a Portuguese teacher, and I
Uh-huh.
also was studying a lot on my own. I had an app, I had my books, I had everything, and I was trying. I was spending hours a day just trying to, get down the basics, just trying to communicate. And we go
Wow.
into the third and fourth month, and I still can't understand what people are saying. And I
Mm.
remember this one night I was just crying, and I was a 17-year-old mama's boy. I was crying, and I was thinking, I'm never going to learn this language. I'm never going to succeed. I'm never going to let me just cut my losses and graduate late in Bahrain.
Oh, wow.
But 5 or 6 months in, started clicking, you
Wow.
know? And I think I had to do my entrance exam on the fourth month. And I didn't know much Portuguese by then, but it was multiple choice. It's a Latin language, so a lot of the words are similar.
Got you.
And there was some guesswork involved. There was some deciphering, like, for example, computador. Okay, so that means computer. Okay, cool. So I understand. So
Okay.
there was a lot of deciphering, and yeah, like you needed. I don't
That's
remember.
crazy.
I think in Brazil you need like 50% to pass, and I think I got like 58% or something.
Hell
And I
yeah.
got in. I
This
got
was an
in.
entrance exam, like a general language exam or a specific, like for computer science?
There's a standardized exam in Brazil called the vestibular, and it's basically general knowledge, language, and it's like a
TOEFL.
test it's like a test to make sure that you are of the education to make it in university.
Wow.
It
Wow.
has chemistry, it has biology, it has literature. It's a mix.
And you passed this in 6 months. That's very impressive.
I mean, like I said, there was guesswork involved, and
Sure. But
but
that's just being humble. But now you speak the language, don't you?
now I do. I can proudly say I do now.
That is
Yeah.
absolutely incredible. So you check that one off, and then what about like the life, the home, the living? Were you comfortable? Were you happy?
I was happy. Like, okay, so I'm such a snob now, like
Okay.
now, oh, I can only sleep with 5 pillows. I need one pillow in between my feet. I need one pillow in between my knees. I need to be on my side. It needs to be like this. And.
Oh.
But in Brazil, I started off sleeping on the ground. I then upgraded to a cushion.
Wow.
Eventually, I upgraded to Leo Nogueira's 5-year-old bed, which he dumped on me because he was leaving to the States. So, and then eventually I made it to Charlotte, North Carolina with Lucas. And again, I went back to sleeping on the ground, but that was by choice because I discovered that sleeping on the ground is very therapeutic, good for your back, good stuff. Like, I'd sooner take the ground before a
Uh-huh.
very old or bad mattress.
Is this before or after your bad back pain in competitions?
Ah, I see where you're going with this.
You do, don't
Perhaps
you?
it played a role.
Perhaps.
Perhaps.
Okay. I'm just guessing now.
Okay. Never thought
Sleeping
of
on a
that. I
concrete
never thought of
floor for a couple of
but
years.
but but yeah, a lifetime of bad mattresses and grounds, perhaps. Perhaps.
Perhaps, yeah. Just let's leave it there. Let's
But
not
yeah,
psychologically push that one. So,
yeah.
so that, but you were happy. Like this is something that so many people they need so much to be happy. Today, maybe you need 5 pillows to sleep happily, but back then, you were happy to be pursuing and feeling like you got a purpose, right? It was jiu-jitsu.
Oh yeah, of course. Like before, it was just
Wow.
like if I had like $40 in my bank account, I would use 30 to register for a competition and 8 for my bus ticket. It
Uh,
really was a simpler time. And
yeah.
I remember even the world championship I won, I think I had like 3 roommates in a room. And I did that for many years, because that's just how we rolled. That's just how we made
Mm.
it. Like you fight an entire season. Like you do Euros, you do Pan Ams, you do Brazilian
Sure.
Nationals. You know, that's a very luxurious order if, you know, you choose to travel a certain way.
Yes.
But I was a student, you know, my humble father was doing everything he could to get me there. And yeah, I owe it all to him.
Incredible. Incredible.
But yeah, like those were, looking back, those were tough times, but I didn't think those were tough times. Like
Absolutely,
the place
man.
we lived in, we used to call it in Portuguese, we used to call it cu do cachorro, like basically the butthole of the dog. And so we lived in Cu do Cachorro. This was an apartment building, and the apartment, it was a fighter house, you know. It was each man for his own, each person on their own, very tight budget. So there was basically no furniture, there was no clock, there was no, people were like competing over toilet paper. It was a very, very humble life, you know.
Wow.
Eventually everybody moved out of that building because it was such a dodgy building. And we were the last tenants there. And it was like when we were finally leaving that building, they weren't even taking rent for us because the lease was over. And they were demolishing the building literally as we were leaving it. And
that's the way you should leave a building, man. When you got to move out, that's how you should move out.
And I remember, like, I don't know, a few weeks after that, I passed by Cu do Cachorro, and it turned into like a real estate office. The building was completely gone, and it was like a small little office in its stead.
If only they knew who's been taking shits there.
yeah, it was a dump. It was a dump. Like,
oh wow.
Whenever I would have a girl over, she would leave.
That's a brave girl to even step in, bro.
It was not an impressive place to be. But then we moved from Cu do Cachorro, which was the apartment butthole, and we moved into the house butthole.
Oh.
And this was also a very humble place. This, for some reason, they called it the cabana. And the cabana. And it was every bit as bad. And it was like, it was pretty bad. And we would regularly get burglared and robbed. I lived actually outside of the house. Yeah. And every time I would need to go to the kitchen and get my food back into my room. Sao Paulo is a very turbulent city with, you know, rain and storms and stuff. So I would have this freshly prepared chicken. And as I would go to my room, my chicken and my hair and my body would just get soaked with the rain and and I was just like, and I would have my wet chicken.
Wow, man, what the fuck? And you were happy. And you were happy.
I had the worst bike in the entire academy. And I remember this one time, it was like a third-hand bike. I still remember it was yellow. I used to call it Thunder. And Thunder, we always parked our bikes at the academy. And there was no real space for bikes, so the bikes would stack up on each other. Right. So if my bike was the first, it would be very difficult to get it out so that I could go home. And I remember one day, the guard at the door, he wasn't looking, or he went to get lunch or whatever, and they stole my bike. And it was the first bike.
Thunder.
Yeah. So whoever stole Thunder had to think, he's not going to miss that crappy bike. Let me just go through the trouble of digging it out of all the other bikes and steal Thunder.
Right.
And I remember being so upset, and I didn't want to pay to buy another bike. Yeah. And so my friend Thomas, he gave me some really old bike, not of his, but his dad's old bike. And
legacy.
Yeah. And then I named her Lipstick because she was pink. And one day when I was in Florianopolis, and it was like across the country, I get a call from my roommate, and he's like, "Adi, we've been robbed again."
No.
And I was like, "What?" And he's like, "Yeah,
Lipstick.
They broke the door." Yeah, I was living with Isaac Bahins, and this guy and another girl. And they stole all of the bikes, Isaac's included, and they left Lipstick.
Okay, nice.
Yeah. So they broke the door, and they stole all of the bikes, and they thought, whoa, if this guy owns this bike, then he must really need it. So I'm just going to have mercy, and I'm going to leave this bike.
That's when you know you hit rock bottom.
Yeah. So when the burglar feels bad for you, but yeah, so Lipstick stuck with me till the end of the journey in Brazil.
Oh shit, man. Oh my god. By the way, like just a side note from that story, I had a similar experience with regards to burglary. My wife and I were in south of France, all right? And south of France, there's an area where it's just extremely like high likelihood of you being robbed. So I park my car and forget our sunglasses in the car, mine and my wife's. So we go, we do our stuff, we come back to the car, it's been broken into. They found a way to open the trunk. They went in. Luckily, we didn't have any money or anything. They pretty much took everything, the coins and whatever was in the car. They took my wife's sunglasses, everything, but they left mine.
Even the coins? My God.
But man, they cleaned the car. It was clean. It was like I sent it to the car wash and they stole the coins in the process. But like they literally cleaned the car. So I didn't mind. But the fuckers, man, which hurt is that they left the glasses. I'm like, they don't like my glasses? What the fuck?
Yeah, that must have been like a double insult, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I totally feel you. So man, you got to keep lipstick, but I love how happiness, you know how they say love is in the eye of the beholder, but so is happiness, because you were calling your bikes thunder and lipstick. You were laughing about your wet chicken to your room. Like literally, it's in the mind. It's what you want it to be. You want it to be a good, funny, memorable experience, or you want to be depressed. And you chose to make it a wonderful experience.
Yeah, and I think, like I said, there were simpler times, you know, like for most of my life, I never pursued money as a primary objective, you know. I always pursued goals and the money to sustain those goals. So the only time I would be somewhat uneasy was when I was lacking the resources to do something jiu-jitsu related.
Yeah, to pursue why you were there. Yeah.
Yeah. And that mentality, it came from my father, of course. You know, my father, he was always a very hardworking, simple man. He always worked hard, always tried to do right by his family. And my parents, you know, if I had the one criticism for them is that they are too kind, they are too generous. You know, sometimes I have to tell them, I'm like, no, you need to be a little bit more ruthless here. You know, you're being way too generous, way too kind. But a lot of those traits, you know, that approach to life where money really isn't a concern, that carries over to me to this day with Elements, you know. And money is never, like every day I get some kind of proposition, you know. Somebody wants to partner up with us, or somebody wants to rent out the space to do boxing or capoeira. Somebody wants to endorse the academy for some kind of product. And I'm like, okay, this doesn't really work with what we're doing here. You know, I'm trying to build a very sustainable legacy, a very sustainable brand. I run the business very professionally.
Good.
And their point is always, no, but this could get you income. Like, okay, but that's not
Income's
really
not everything.
what we're doing. Yeah, like if income was my concern, I would have studied, I don't know, business and finance or whatever, got into banking, and I would get like, you know, a very decent salary that would sustain me. Like jiu-jitsu, I never got into jiu-jitsu. I was like, oh, I'm going to be cashing in because of this, you know?
Exactly.
That was, you know, actually it was quite the opposite. Like I started in 2006, you know? Making a living from jiu-jitsu is not what it is today. So when I made that decision way back when, I went in with the mentality of, yeah, this is the life I'm choosing for myself. Thankfully, in that time, I learned a lot of techniques, like life techniques, business techniques, marketing techniques, you know, and the sports and the industry has developed to the point where I can live happily, you know. I recently got married in December, and that is by no stretch of the imagination. It would have not been possible if not for jiu-jitsu, you know. So I always say that every good thing that has happened to me in my life is because of a jiu-jitsu, you know. Meeting the king of Bahrain, meeting Sheikh Nasser, Sheikh Khaled, developing a relationship with them, getting married, opening my academy, you know, doing right by my family, taking care of the people most important to me. All of that happened because of a decision I made to take a chance with jiu-jitsu.
Yeah. Man, that's so beautiful. And I think it's just a big lesson for everybody is when you approach something with the intention of a monetary gain, of something not alive, you know what I mean? Because money is a matter of fiction. It's just a fiction, a fairy tale that they created and printed it into papers. And people believe in it too much. But when you pursue value to others, value to yourself, man, that's really where it's at, man. It makes me so happy to hear your story. So congratulations, obviously, on getting married. That's a beautiful thing to hear. I wanted to dig a little bit into your actual jiu-jitsu experience in Brazil versus jiu-jitsu in the Middle East. So you went to Brazil on your mother's advice, which was fantastic, by the way, because that's, I think, has a lot to do with why you are who you are today. How was it like stepping into Alliance, Fabio Gurgel's instruction there with the Brazilians? Did they receive you well? How did it feel?
Um, it was similar to that feeling where in 2009 I was with World Pro and I would see all of these, Michael Jordans and Kobe Bryants, all around me. And
Yeah.
when I went into Alliance Sao Paulo, that was like the Renaissance era. I think
Mm.
Cabrini and Lucas Lepri just left, but
Mm-hmm.
Leo Nogueira, Bernardo Faria, Michael Langhi, and Sergio Marias, and like they were all there.
Wow.
They were doing the same classes I was and winning at the highest level. They were becoming legends in the sport. So I was like,
Wow.
oh my God, I am literally breathing the same recipe as them.
Yeah.
You
You're
know?
drinking the Kool-Aid.
Yeah, I am high in that Kool-Aid. And yeah, I learned a lot of things when I was
Mm.
there. I think the major takeaway from Brazil was becoming tougher because
Mm-hmm.
of, my less than stellar life,
Mm-hmm.
my less than luxurious life, but also because
Okay.
of the training, but also because of, learning to become a
Sure.
grown man, learning to become self-sufficient. But that training, it really made me tough. It really made me aggressive in my fighting.
Mm-hmm.
I became much more technical when I came back to Bahrain. Here's why. So
Mm.
when you're there, you're in the Shark Tank. So if you're not rolling with Michael Langhi or Sergio Marias, you're rolling with other people trying to make a name for themselves.
Oh
So if it's
shit.
not the high level guys, it's a purple belt like myself, it's a blue belt like myself. They're trying to accomplish the same thing.
Mm.
And when we were given the option to choose our roles, of course, I would every single round choose the toughest guy. That was my mentality. Train
Mm-hmm.
as hard as possible every single time. And when you're training with somebody that challenges you physically, technically, intellectually, spiritually,
Mm.
there is not much space for development, for experimentation, for
Interesting.
creativity.
Okay.
If I am training with, again, I keep saying Michael Langhi because he's the one constant for me. Since I arrived there as a blue belt until I left, he was the guy that just completely whooped my butt the whole time,
Wow.
So when I train with Michael Langhi, I can't just be like, oh, I saw this technique on YouTube, like how to do the berimbolo or whatever. Let me try that with Michael. How do you think that's going to turn out? Not very well. And it's not really an ego thing because I would be so unsuccessful at that
Mm-hmm.
experimentation. I'm not even
Demoralized.
practicing. No,
Mm.
it's not even that. I'm not practicing. Like practice is only useful when you are successfully implementing something. So when
Sure.
you're in the Shark Tank, there isn't much space to practice. He'll just beat me so easily. He won't have a great session. And I
Mm.
will just not try anything new. So I wouldn't learn anything. So when I came back to Bahrain and I was a brown belt at the time, there was a huge, disparity because nobody is really a professional there. I was the only professional. And when I first came, I thought the way was roll with all the tough guys, the blue belts, the brown belts, the black belts, whatever, and then
Mm.
just roll extra with them and then train the next morning and then do your weight. I thought it was volume.
Okay.
But then I saw that that wasn't working out. Like if I would train with somebody, some casual brown belts, uh, what would happen is that he's not benefiting because I'm just going full on crazy, spazzy electric chair on him. He's not benefiting. And
Okay.
I'm not benefiting because I'm not being challenged. So
Mm.
I learned to train in a way that is useful for them and very challenging for me. That usually involves self-imposed conditions. That's
Nice.
been my system for the last 5 years, self-imposed conditions that I put on myself. And with those conditions in mind, I train as hard as possible. I'm not a believer in flow
Interesting.
rolling or going slow or doing a warm-up round, but I do
Okay.
believe that you train to the best of your ability given the conditions. So the
Micro
condition could
training.
be, yeah, like the condition could be maybe I'm only going to do this submission. Maybe I'm just going to do open guard. Maybe I'm going to start in bad positions.
Okay.
And now at Elements, because I'm running the classes, it can be done in a much more systematic way as well, you know?
Nice.
So that was one aspect of it. Another aspect was that I'm not in Sao Paulo anymore,
Mm.
and everybody else is casual. So it's not like you can just go up to somebody and they'll teach you how to master the berimbolo or
Sure.
whatever, you know? We had, I don't want to say a shortage of information. That seems kind of too harsh, you know? But I
Okay.
did have to resort to the online.
Mm.
And that was my system. Purchase a DVD or follow somebody or
And Bernardo
subscribe.
Faria, interestingly enough, Bernardo Faria was right next to you when you had to do this.
Yeah, but I'm talking about when I came back to Bahrain, you know?
Yeah. Oh, okay,
So
okay, yes.
yeah, so you know, so this is when I didn't have a lot of options, you know?
Okay, okay.
And yeah, so it's basically, you know, purchase a DVD or subscribe on some service,
Mm.
learn the techniques, and then implement them in a very systematic way in my drills,
Yeah,
and then in my rolls, and then eventually in competition. And that's why I started becoming really technical after I came back from Brazil. I became super tough and tenacious in Brazil. But when I came back, it's those, you know, that system of drilling, learning, implementing.
sure.
I'll be honest, I only really learned berimbolo, spider guard, side mount, knee on belly, like my go-to positions at black belts or at late brown.
Interesting.
Most of these things came to me very late in my career, which is why when somebody tells you getting your black belt is only the beginning, it really is true. You know, as long as you have that white belt mindset where I'm
Yeah.
a sponge and I try to absorb as much as possible,
Yes.
uh, yeah, the sky is the limit. And especially today as a coach, you know, I have an obligation, I have a responsibility to study as much as possible, to be up to date so that I can deliver to my students the
Yeah.
most well-rounded experience. I don't want to just deliver to them my favorite ankle locks or my favorite half guard or my favorite electric passing, you know.
Sure.
I owe it to them to give them the best resources so that they can blossom and grow into whatever they're supposed to grow into.
Yeah.
If I just teach people how to be Ali,
Mm-hmm.
best case scenario, they're going to become an inferior copy of Ali.
Yeah.
But when you give them the tools that they need, they can become so much more
Yeah.
than what they could be, so much more than what I could have hoped for myself.
Yeah.
And that
They
is
can
the
be their
goal.
own.
Yes, that is the goal. When somebody walks into the academy today, whether they're a kid, whether they're a white belt, whether they're an older person, whether they're, you know, somebody wanting to learn self-defense,
Yeah.
they are so much better equipped today than they were in 2006, or they would have been in 2006.
Hands
And
down.
that's all I want, you know? I want
Yeah.
to provide them the best resources, in my opinion, so that they can accomplish more. They can accomplish better things.
Yes.
That is the real goal.
I have a question for you since you touch up on this. When you're in Brazil, you're training with high level black belts, brown belts, purple belt killers. And I imagine from what you're saying that the environment is very much less let's teach each other and do warm-ups and more let's kill each other and get tougher. Then you go to Bahrain where you have more people lower than you in belts. This is an argument or let's say a debate. Is it better to train with higher level belts to get better, or is it better to train with lower level belts?
Well, when I was in Brazil, it was always higher belts. I would force that on myself. And
Sure.
when I was in Bahrain, I wasn't given the option because
Yes.
those were our resources.
Okay.
And then somewhere down the line, I was camping with Lucas Lepri, and I stayed
Mm-hmm.
there for the entire summer. And I did the same thing. There were like plenty of good brown belts. There were some good black belts there at the time. There was obviously Lucas himself, you know,
Yeah.
and I would impose on myself the toughest roles every single time. And then one day Lucas told me, Ali, you need to train with some of the lower belts. First of all, you know, you're a brown belt from overseas. It's a good opportunity for them, and they deserve that opportunity, but also for your own development. How are you going to develop if you're going full on competitive mode with the black belts every single round?
You hadn't
And
been
that stuck
training with
with me.
lower belts before that? Like before that, you're always climbing up the ranks as the lower belt?
Well, I was a brown belt at the time, so naturally I would be training with brown and black belts.
But I mean before brown belt, like were you always the lower belt in Brazil when you were training?
Um, it depends, you know. So either I was like Michael Lungy's warm up round, or I
Okay.
would fight the black belt casuals or the brown or purple belts that were of my level or size. Yeah. But I would never willingly go for casual color belts. That's my
Interesting.
point. You know?
Interesting. Okay.
But then I learned from Lucas that for your own personal development, rolling with lower belts is a necessity. And it comes
Interesting.
back to that system that I created for myself when I came back to Bahrain. You know,
Yeah.
if I just learned how to do spider guard, it's not going to work out and I'm not going to be able to practice it with Lucas. I
Mm-hmm.
need to go with the blue belt. I need to kind of be awkward about it. I need to set it up, you know, and then slowly practice it and then climb up the ranks with my newly attained spider guard.
Got you. Got
And
you.
that's where most of my development came from. That's revelation
Yes.
and just studying things, implementing them, and then absorbing them into the DNA of my game.
Fantastic, man. Like, because this is a big thing for me. I found myself in the last 2 to 3 years, I'm training almost only with black belts and brown belts. My coach and the environment that he's training in is all the black belts. And I found myself consistently getting my ass handed to me. I am developing an incredible defense and a tenacity and toughness, but I can't experiment. You can't, like, as I'm a purple belt right now, and I can't experiment shit on black belts, especially the caliber of black belts that are training here. You can't really do much against them. So I think it's great advice, and I should definitely try looking at rolling with lower belts so I can start, saying like what you're saying, okay, let me just try to hit a kimura. Let me just try to escape side control better. Let me try to do certain things that I can't do with a black belt.
Yeah. I mean, I had to learn that by necessity.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a piece of advice that I can deliver to people is like,
yeah,
like the lower belts, they're a necessary part of your development for sure.
Okay. So somebody now listening to you, inspired by you, I want to go to Brazil now. Do you think going to Brazil and doing a 1, 2, 3 year immersion in Jiu-Jitsu is essential these days or not?
I wouldn't say it's essential, no.
Not essential.
Yeah, because like most of, the Middle Eastern athletes that are up and coming now, most of them are based in their own countries, And I like to believe even in my very own hometown, I'm providing the best resources to the best of my ability,
Yes.
Like, yeah, I really believe that it's not a necessity. And I learned after being in what was arguably the best academy in the world, or one of them, I learned that it's not about how good your resources are, but it's about how well you utilize the resources you're given. You look 100%. At the top guys, you look at the greatest ones, Marcelo Garcia or Roger Gracie, or even
Braulio Sima. Braulio Sima came from a place with nobody.
Yeah, but even like, let's talk about nowadays, like somebody like Adam Vardinsky or the Norwegians, Espen and Vangarkar, they're all based in their hometowns and they're doing the best they can, know? And I think kind of coming in from an underdog background, it gives you this kind of tenacity and hunger that you wouldn't get coming from a quote unquote privileged academy,
Got you.
Like I've never been to Atos headquarters with Andre Galvao, but I would imagine that it's very easy for you to fade in the background because literally all of the killers are there,
Yes.
Like
yes.
your average competitors class has like 60 people training, 20 of them being black belts, So as a, as a somewhat average purple, brown, black belt, whatever, perhaps that's not the best place for you, depending on your mentality, depending on your personality, of course.
That makes so much sense when you put it that way, because a lot of people have this fantasy, and it's not just jiu-jitsu, business, life, travel. Person's not satisfied with what they have and they think going somewhere else and they'll find it. If you can't find it where you are, you're not going to find it where you're going. And I think the way you put it makes so much sense, because if you're going to a place thinking that it's the best, it's the mecca of jiu-jitsu, you're going to be another pilgrimage. Like you're going to be another pilgrim that's not essential to that crowd. You know what I mean? I definitely see that places like, let's say Serbia is an example that I've seen. They have incredible jiu-jitsu out of necessity, out of hunger to be good. Lebanon, I was just talking yesterday to Daniel Hilal. they got incredible talent that grew within 10 years because they're just starving, and whatever information they got in jiu-jitsu, they shoot the shit out of it. Versus being spoiled and having 10 black belts on the mat and teaching you all the techniques. You're like, okay, tomorrow. I'll focus tomorrow. Today, I'll take it easy.
And, I think that happened to me a lot when I was there. Because, every day we had Fabio, Michael Langhi, Sergio Moraes showing a technique. And, you take that for granted. Or at least it's a bit too much to absorb. But when you're a sponge in a town that doesn't have much, you're gonna inhale any bit of information you can get.
Yes, 100%. Do you feel Bahrain has now, because it's impressive, I really feel UAE, Bahrain and Jordan stood out in combat in the region because for one reason or another, it fit the mentality, the people, the culture, and it just clicked. Bahrain right now, how do you see the level of jiu-jitsu?
Well, I'm biased, but whenever I talk to my Bahraini peers, I always say that we're cut from a different cloth, and we're fishermen by heritage, and
let's catch them in our nets.
yeah, it's true, man. The Bahraini, the passionate one, they're tough. I have quite a few training partners, and they're up and comers, some of them. But, they're hungry, and they could just get, mocked around by somebody the entire day, and they'll still come in the next day with the same amount of hunger. I have students who are over 40, not professional by any means,
Okay.
But shout out to Rada Royan, I'm sure he's listening. Rada, actually, he trained in the UAE for a long time with Thabit.
Okay.
This guy, he is one of the toughest guys you'd ever know. Not necessarily because of a dangerous game, but because of that Bahraini, in my opinion, Bahraini tenacity.
I love it. I love it.
If you want to submit somebody like Rez, you're gonna have to really deserve it, because he's not gonna give it to you for free. So I believe that is something that we fishermen have innate in us, and I take it upon myself and obviously my peers to develop the next generation of fishermen to become killer fishermen,
I love it. Do you fish?
I'm not very good at it, but
us fishermen must bond together. When was the last time you caught a fish?
When you think of a Bahraini fisherman, they're wearing that, that skirt thing, and they're throwing the nets. I get the most expensive rod in the store, and I throw it into the sea. And for me, this is a fishing trip. If I can get one catch, all right, let's take the Instagram picture. We're done. This is my luck. It's checked out. I'm pushing my luck with that one fish.
Very wise. Very wise.
I do enjoy it, though.
I come from a big fishing background since I was a kid. Really? I love it. And if you fish long enough, the truth of the matter is 70% of fishing trips end up empty. They end up boat rides. So it is a lot to do with it. So you're on the money. When you catch that one fish, kiss it, hug it, take pictures with it. Cherish the moment, because it's not that common.
Yeah. And it's so anticlimactic. It is not really the way jiu-jitsu is, which brings me to another point, You know how people keep calling jiu-jitsu the game of human chess? I disagree, because I'm not very good at chess. I love chess.
Yes.
I take any opportunity to find somebody to play with them, which is not very often. I'm terrible at it. But if I play chess the way I play jiu-jitsu, I'm losing within 4 steps. Chess is so much more calculated, and it's not about the aggressor, Yes. You have to be so strategic. You have to plan something. And in many ways, jiu-jitsu is like that, where, a black belt has all of these setups, all of these, nets that he can catch you in. But if you, fight in chess, you're going to lose very quickly. You need, they're not quite the same things, my point.
I've had this debate with close friends of mine, and I totally agree with you in the sense of the traditional chess board and the rules of chess do not mimic jiu-jitsu. I actually see, if you wanted to make it a proper analogy of chess to jiu-jitsu, imagine you only had the front line of chess pieces and all of the different chess pieces were queens. That's jiu-jitsu. Because you're constantly attacking and you're constantly under attack, and you just have one wall where you decide, am I attacking or defending? You either keep that wall intact or you open it up and then you've got queens flying everywhere. That's jiu-jitsu.
Well, not to be philosophical about it, but I would make a
Let's go.
counter argument, you know? So,
Okay.
all right. So I learned this from Fabio a long time ago. The guard comes in layers. Okay. So
Okay.
in chess, you can create a barrier, a protective barrier around your king, so it's pawns, then it's maybe a couple bishops, and you can have the protective layer before they finally pass your guard,
Yeah.
if you will.
Yes.
So
Yes.
the theory of guard layers is the very first and best layer is closed guard. When they get out of your closed guard, they now have to deal with your second layer, which is your open guard. If they're past your open guard, they get to the final layer, which is half guard. And then when they're finally done with half guard, they get your king, and that's the guard pass and subsequently the submission.
Gotcha.
He was telling us this just to make a very general point, saying that if you choose to have half guard as your primary game, you are foregoing the better layers. And
you're on the last step.
Yes, you're willingly putting yourself in the last step. And obviously, some people like Bernardo Faria and countless others made half guard work for themselves. Sure. But fundamentally speaking, they are one short step away from getting their checkmate, if you will.
So true. They, like John Danaher is a big advocate of half guard to attack and to defend, because he says it's one of the greatest positions to attack and it's one of the greatest positions to defend. It's just the difference between who knows how to do it better than the other. And if you come up short, you're fucked, because that's where you get passed. That's where you get tapped, actually, directly from there. So, wow, what a nice way to explain that. There is parallels between chess and jiu-jitsu.
there is, like,
now that we get into it.
Yeah.
I like this game that they play, which is obviously it's not realistic for fighting, but it's a nice let's say mental practice. It's the step-by-step, move-by-move game that they play, where I hold a grip, you do a movement one by one, and you see where you fall short and where's the order that you should be following.
Yeah. We used to do that when I was younger, and it would always end up in arguments because you're supposed to do one move. And then,
well, you did two. Oh yeah, you lifted your leg too, motherfucker.
Them. You're like, it's a cross collar and an off balance and a choke, and so that never worked out for us because we were so competitive,
Lower your head into my hand.
Yeah.
I get you. So let's talk a little bit about Elements Jiu Jitsu Academy. Now you're back. You're in Bahrain. When did you start Elements? Was it when you got your black belt or before?
We only started Elements in late August of last year, so it's very recent. Yeah. Obviously, we've had, thankfully, thank God, tremendous success since then. Amazing. But it is very recent.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what was the reason behind choosing to open your own academy? Do you have do you have a mission? Do you have a plan behind it?
Well, as a professional, it was always going to be the natural progression, right? Because if you're a professional in jiu-jitsu, it always ends,
that's how you make a living.
Yeah, exactly, And up until that point, I was still in that lifestyle where, I'm doing my best to become an athlete. Mm-hmm. That was always, my number one priority. And obviously, I was, I had a teaching job and I was helping out, and I had the occasional seminar, but that was not really a way to, kind of settle and move on with my life. It was just a way of sustaining my jiu-jitsu lifestyle. And to that effect, I was very successful at sustaining my jiu-jitsu lifestyle. But,
Amazing.
You start to get older, you start to get, ambitious, you start to think about what you can develop, what you can contribute, and I knew that there was so much good work that I could do, because the way we approach things at Elements, I wouldn't say it's, the first people ever to do it, but we definitely have a unique approach in the systematic way we do everything,
Okay.
So a lot of people are against upgrading people based on the quantity of their classes. We'll get to that. I'm a huge advocate of that. But also, I'm a huge advocate of a systematic methodology. So my no-gi classes run on a schedule. They run on a curriculum. We train our instructors in them. Same thing for our fundamentals course. Same thing for our kids course, which I'm very proud of.
Nice.
I just finished designing our new advanced course, which is going to be a separate class for people who are blue belt and above.
Okay.
And I'm very systematic about it. And my coaches, who and my assistant coaches at the academy, like, I make my point very clear. Like, if you want to be a part of this, we will teach you, we will train you, and I need you just to have that same vision of perfection that I'm trying to implement every day. But
Nice.
back to, having a systematic approach to your upgrades.
Sure.
So you and I, we come from a different time. It was usually something along the lines of, don't ask me about your belt, don't ask me about your upgrade, I'll surprise you whenever it's good for me.
Right.
That's how jiu-jitsu culture was, brought up.
Yes.
And it happens that a lot of academies, like, without naming academies, like, there are a lot of franchises in the world where they do the systematic approach, but then they don't really commit to it. So let's say I have you and 5 other guys,
Yep.
finish your classes, you did well enough, I'm going to upgrade you, but I'm going to hold back the other 4 because I feel like they're not ready. I feel like they're not ready. First of all, basing things on your feeling is a mistake. Second, if 1 out of 5 people succeeded in my system, then it must not be a very good system. Because people say, but Adi, what if somebody attends all of your classes and they don't make it. Well, they don't make it, and I hope that they're 1 in 100, because I believe that my system is supposed to help people make it. Obviously, I don't count their classes when they go to other academies or they visit other places. I count their classes when they are doing the classes of their level at Elements, at the Elements curriculum. And there will be a test. Also, the requirements are quite rigorous. Like, if you were to train at Elements, fully commit yourself, really do everything by the book, it will still take you at least 8 to 10 years to receive your black belts.
Nice.
It's not like we're doing some kind of Mac Dojo methodology.
Okay, now we're talking.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
I'm so pro this. I'm so pro a decade to get a black belt minimum.
Yeah. And, sometimes you're going to have a prodigy, and, like, how some major academies, like, they would have somebody and they would win, like, adult brown belt worlds. And this is back in the day. The head coach, he would keep them at brown belts just because he knows that they would win brown belt again the next year.
Yes.
But the way I see it as a coach, if you won adult purple, blue belt worlds, whatever, then that's the ultimate goal. And unless there's a huge problem that needs to be addressed, like attitude or attendance or some kind of external problem, then you deserve your next belt.
Okay.
And I'm a huge, huge advocate of believing in my students. And in the sense that I don't like to give my student the message, oh, we're going to do worlds this year and we're going to keep you at blue because you have a better chance to win at blue. What kind of message does that send to him?
Yep.
I want to send to him the message that I'm going to give you your purple belt 6 months before worlds, and you're going to go and you're going to smash them because I believe in you. You have nothing left to prove at your previous belts.
Nice.
I think that's much better for the development. That's much better for the technique. That's much better for the progression. And, that's just my humble opinion.
I think, Ali, there's so many layers to this onion, because we look at it, you have the layer of competitors, people that want to be the best at their belt and move forward. That's when you say, I'm going to give you a purple belt 6 months before the worlds and you're going to smash them. But if every single gym in the world did that, then only one person can be the smasher and everybody's smashed. But there's also the layer of casuals. Jiu-Jitsu as a business doesn't depend on the competitors. The competitors are the poster childs. But as a business, it depends on people like me. People like the 40-year-olds that you spoke about that train out of love. They're good. They're still killers. But they're not doing this because they want to make it a living. They're doing it because they love it. And it just frees their mind from whatever they're stressed out about.
Yes.
I feel like the biggest issue with academies happens. I agree with you. For these people, maybe the system makes more sense. But I think we have a lot of things in life that are already organized. A lot of things that are already systemized. That we feel like we're going through this conveyor belt of life. I find a romance with the lack of knowledge. Now, don't get me wrong, having a master that's sahi, that's looking at you, that knows the fuck you're doing, not a master
Yeah.
that's like, who was this guy? So
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
I like not knowing. I like trusting the person who I decided to learn from to decide when it's right for me or not. As long as I have that relationship. But now, granted, I understand if you want to run a business, an academy, you can't do this with 100 students. It just doesn't make sense.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
A counterpoint I would give you as well. Like, first of all, the argument you made about 100 students, that's very true. If I
Yeah.
have 2 students, perhaps I can very accurately convey my feelings, you know? But
True.
when you're running a successful academy, like thankfully, not to jinx it, before we had to close because of the pandemic, we had
True.
almost 100 active students. So
Nice. Mashallah.
that already was way too much for me to kind of formalize an opinion on every single student.
Absolutely.
Every student has a sheet, and
Mm.
I believe it's so important for the student to look at their sheet and visualize their progression. If I come and train on Thursday, I'm going to get a stripe. If I come and train 3 times a week for the next 3 months, I can apply to test for my purple belt. That's amazing. And another thing is, like, I don't know why this should be so different with jiu-jitsu. Let's say you're at college,
Okay.
you're paying a fee, you're getting education, and you have goals, whatever they may be.
Mm-hmm.
And imagine you go to your professor at the college, at the university, and you ask him, when am I graduating? And he goes, "Hush! Do not talk about graduation. You infidel disciple. You cannot ask me about that. Don't ask me. I'm going to delay you for 1 more year."
I love it.
That's just not how it works. And I think this is true for kids, but also for adults. Like, you don't know what the adults has in their life.
Sure.
Maybe that stripe that they're hoping for is going to make their day. Maybe it's going to make their week.
Yes.
So I don't like the idea of upgrade ceremonies at the end of a year or mid-season or whatever for that reason, because
I totally agree. Ooh.
Yeah, because who's going to make the cut, right? First of all, everybody's hoping they're going to make the cut. So by default, if they don't make the cut, they're bitter.
Yeah.
Second, I am unifying everybody into one conveyor belt, and I'm saying, this is your day. All 12 of you, or all 15 of you, or all 20 of you.
Inequality,
Yes. But if everybody has their own sheet, everybody has their own personalized journey, everybody earns to the stripe, they earn their upgrade on the day they deserve it. Every day is their day.
Yeah.
That feels a lot more special, because he's going to see, oh, today I received my brown belt, and it's because I deserved it. And the coach stopped the entire class to talk about my progression and give me my 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Because you were talking about how jiu-jitsu is mainly casuals and not professionals.
Yes.
Professionals are the 3%. And I would argue in the Middle East, maybe even less than 3%. So why should I cater my academy, my institute, my home to everybody, to the 3%ers?
Yes.
I absolutely am an advocate. Like, it should be a home for everybody, but also, like, if I were to make a choice, obviously the choice would go to the 97%ers.
Yes.
Fabio once said, the 3%ers, chances are they're probably not even paying to train, they're like sponsored athletes or whatever, So
Exactly.
The 3%ers aren't making your boat float,
Absolutely. They're just leading the boat, but they're not making it float.
Yeah. And they're just, as you said, they're the face, but they're not the foundation.
Yeah, absolutely. They're not rowing. And this is the thing, Ali, like, for one, with regards to the school comparison, I love how you put it in terms of, like, the professor not telling you when you're going to graduate high school or university. I am one of the least believers in the educational system. I am an advocate of craftsmanship. I'm an advocate of apprenticeship. I believe the education system is a factory production line that was designed for the Industrial Revolution. They're teaching you rules to a game that doesn't exist anymore. And you can see this. We're overpopulated. Too many people graduating, nobody getting jobs. The system's broken. And this is part of why I also refer it with martial arts. Martial arts history. And again, I am no way saying that there's a right or a wrong, because I'm a person that believes you can take A, B, C, or D vehicles, and as long as you arrive to the destination, the right destination, I'm happy for you. But to a large extent, I love the martial arts apprenticeship factor, which is patience, discipline, trust to the master, relationship, long-lasting one with the master. This is part of my journey, but it is not for everybody. And it is not a good business model at fucking all. It is a horrible business model, a horrible way to run an academy. I totally agree with you on that. But I don't know if this is for the 3%, because I think there's a bigger percentage of people that want martial arts in that way. But I love to see in the Middle East somebody approaching it the way you are, because we definitely need a structure. We need to know what the fuck we're doing. We need a curriculum. I don't see that prevalent yet, and it's refreshing to hear you talk about it.
And this isn't by any means me being a snob because
No,
I've studied
no.
jiu-jitsu for so many years.
Mm.
You don't need to be the most knowledgeable guy in history to have a system, you know? You just need to take the time, maybe study a little bit on methodology, study a little bit, you know, on how to, you know, deal with students and things like that, and then go down, write it down, and in the end, it comes down to trial and error, you know?
Yes.
Fabio Gurgel himself, he speaks of mistakes he made 2-3 years ago that he's amended today, you know? Like, in the end, you're going to have to run your business and you make adaptations. It's like nobody opened their business and 20 years later, they're still doing the same thing.
Right.
And I'm very, like, a lot of negativity, a lot of unfortunate things happen because of this lockdown, you know?
Yes.
People are suffering, families are suffering, businesses are suffering, and a lot of small businesses, small to medium businesses are closing down.
Yes.
I think we prepared ourselves the best we could. Like, I was never the kind that, you know, that didn't have a balance sheet, that didn't do proper accounting.
Amazing.
That, you know, like, and this isn't me bragging. I am surrounded by a very good team, you know?
That's the way to do it, man.
Yes. But the one silver lining in all of this is that the free time that I've gained at this time, my God, I've learned things that I would have not learned in the next 5 years. I'm talking about how to run a business. I'm talking about information marketing. I'm talking about infrastructure, like class infrastructure, all of that stuff. And while doing that, and again, this isn't a me thing. This is my team. I'm so fortunate because of my team. We have a very good team of professionals.
Cool.
Man, like in this time alone, we started our online classes. We launched Elements Online, which is the first jiu-jitsu online platform in the region. It took so much work. And I'm going to tell you right now to your face, if I was alone in this, I would have quit like 2 weeks in, because getting it started is the most difficult part, you know?
Yes.
And a couple days ago, we just wrapped up our second online video course, which we're going to sit on it for a few weeks. We won't reveal it until then. But my point is that second course, that second course, it took us like 2 days to finish production. Whereas the first course took us up to 3 months.
It's always the hardest,
Yeah. And like, you know, we launched our online store, and like we made so many developments as an academy, as a business, for me as an individual during this time.
Amazing.
Like, it's only frustrating that I can't wait to implement all of this knowledge because we still can't open our academies, you know? I just can't wait till all of this is over, because whatever success we've had before, I really believe that I am 1,000 times better equipped now.
Man, the light is at the end of the tunnel, and I can't wait to see the result of this, because, man, everything that you're saying makes me more confident that we're getting out of this pandemic situation better as a society, as a jiu-jitsu community. And I believe that the cream will rise to the top of the academies that invested this time down, which they would have never had, man. We're basically back to school days without school. We've got nothing to fucking do. So it's a decision. Do I want to get better and improve, or do I not? And I'm so happy. I can't wait, man. I'm so fucking excited to see what comes out of this region as a result of this lockdown.
Yeah. Like I said, you know, it's tough. Like, I'm talking to you now, you know, with a very serene, calm, accepting mindset. But, you know, like, this has been a turbulent time. But again, I'm surrounded by a very good team. I'm surrounded by a very supportive family. I don't think I am particularly the strongest or the most steadiest mindset kind of person. I owe it all, you know, to the people I'm so fortunate to have around me. And yeah, like everybody seems to agree that we're going to go back to normal soon. And I really hope that's going to come because...
I feel it is. I feel like, look, humbly speaking, without worrying anybody, I'm just waiting till November to really celebrate. You know what I mean? Because this summer, I don't know. Might go back to normal life, might not. Most likely we will. I'm just worried good weather starts coming back around again and some cases start appearing. If media does what it did last year, we're screwed.
Yeah.
Or this year. Like, it's not going to disappear and the treatment is not coming. But as long as we become more well-equipped, more well-prepared, look at academies, how they're preparing, how they're monitoring, how they're spacing out, scheduling classes differently, maybe doing less students per class. I don't know how it's going to work business-wise, but changes will be done.
Yeah, I mean, we have we set up our protocols on, you know, how to get people back into training, but those protocols, we're gonna have to change them when the government, you know, announces their restrictions, you know.
Yeah.
But we have like an A scenario, a B scenario, a C scenario, and yeah, we're good to go. Like,
amazing.
Yeah, we redid the whole facility. We're set up in every sense of the word.
You're 100% Jiu-Jitsu, Ali, right?
Oh yeah. Like
this is what you do from morning to night.
Like yeah. It's been like that for quite some time. And I mean, technically, one time I had a kickboxing fight, a Thai boxing fight. I won by TKO. I was quite the high kicker, apparently. And but yeah, that was just for fun. For fun. Didn't really have like proper training camp for it or whatever.
Sure.
And I very soon discovered that you can't do kickboxing like you do jiu-jitsu or chess, you know. Because like in kickboxing, you know, there's, you know, you have to worry about your stance, you have to worry about your footwork, you have to worry about what your opponent is going to do. And I was going full on electric chair with my kickboxing. I was like, you know? And it worked, you know. I fought somebody who was my level and it worked. But obviously that's not how life works.
I love it. And that's why they say there's a puncher's chance in these arts. You couldn't really go electric chair in jiu-jitsu that much, luckily. Although some people do.
Have you done kickboxing or any other sports?
So I used to do boxing for 8 years, and I used to compete in boxing, but I got humbled by jiu-jitsu. I used to win. I used to be very good in the middleweight division, amateur level, obviously, during the time I was competing, but I just got humbled by jiu-jitsu. I felt like I couldn't touch the person I was fighting. And then that experience I told you about, the younger, half my size guy. Martial arts, discipline, sports, athleticism, they're all great. They're all fantastic. But the problem I find with most martial arts is rather, you know how we talked about your security as a child and your confidence to not get into fights? And I'm saying this with all respect to all martial arts. I love them all. I'm a big fan of mixed martial arts. These martial arts do not deflate ego, because I think they do the contrary. Depends how you do them. If you fight and spar and really get your ass kicked, it'll deflate your ego. But if you don't and you train it as a casual, it'll make you super insecure, because you know you've never really tested yourself. You've never really been in the thick of it. And when the time comes, you're going to want to prove it. And that's when shit gets dangerous. In jiu-jitsu, you're in the thick of it every fucking day, casual or not, 100% strangled, tapped, everything. So you've vented, you know where you stand in the food chain, and there's not going to be any confusion. I feel like other martial arts are stressful to people. I see them, they're stressed out. When they're in a confrontation situation, they puff up their chest, they start getting out, like, what the fuck are you doing, man? Yeah. You don't need to do, if you knew what the fuck you're doing and you know how ugly a fight really is, you don't fucking do this, you don't peacock, you know?
Yeah, and like when I'm in a tournament, whenever somebody peacocks at me before a fight, whether it's by shouting or slapping themselves, I have a mini celebration in my head, because I'm like, okay, this guy's terrified. Let's do this.
They need it. You know? Yes. It's a psychological cue. You're so right. Yes.
Yeah. That's why I admired Marcelo Garcia so much. He smiled before the fight, during the fight, and after that. He was just like this goofball who's like, the whole time.
And then slaughters you.
Yeah.
I love it. Such a good point, man. And that's the way like martial artists should carry themselves, with confidence. Prepare in the training room, go to war in the training room, so that when you go out, you can go just carry a big smile and influence people positively. You don't have to scare the shit out of people, you know, right?
Yeah. In the end, you and I were ambassadors for the sport.
Yeah,
So we want to give the sport the best representation that invites more people to get in, more people to
100%.
promote the sport, and more people to spread it.
Yes.
We don't want to exclude people. This isn't some kind of access only boys club. No,
No.
it's for everybody.
No, not at all, man. And man, I really love talking to you and hearing, because it makes me so hopeful now. Like the more people I'm talking to in the region, the more I realize, like, God damn, man, we're sitting on a gold mine. This region is gonna explode in the next 5 years when it comes to talent. And Ali, like with all respect and admiration to what you do, you're a unique case because your father did jiu-jitsu, your father's a black belt, and you did jiu-jitsu under a father and mother that understand jiu-jitsu. That's something that's very unique and special about you. Now imagine your child in the future, may God bless you with many, but like, man, you're talking about third generation jiu-jitsu in an Arab country. That's crazy to me. And
Yeah,
this is where I'm like, man, I can't wait to see this next generation that are living under black belts.
yeah.
Oof.
I never actually thought of it that way.
Mm.
Like, I think that currently, like I said before, people are just so much more equipped than back in 2005 or 2000 or the 90s.
Yeah,
So
man.
our kids, may God bless us, are going to be a million times better equipped than we were,
Yeah,
naturally.
man. Like, your mom is way beyond any mother in that generation to say go to Brazil if you want to do jiu-jitsu. But I imagine
It's
that the next generation of moms going to the kids is like, honey, you had the kimura open, or you could have gone into an arm drag. Why didn't you? Like, imagine a
well,
mom saying
well,
this.
you'll be surprised. You'll be surprised because um, I have some kids or like their parents. I deal with
Yeah.
them like overseas, like a couple in the UAE and a couple of
Okay.
kids in Kuwait. They've come to Elements just to train, and I see how driven the parents are. Like,
Yes.
I sit down and I have meetings with the parents and we discuss like their progression, what are we going to do about them, the competitions that we're planning for. And the
Wow.
parents are so involved to the point that very regularly, even in Bahrain, even with the parents in Bahrain, I have to always say, guys, just like step aside, let us do the work with the kids. Because like
Yes.
when the kids are rolling or they're doing like positional training, the parents get so invested they become like boxing coaches, just jumping into the mat
I
area,
know. I know.
and yeah, so
Yeah.
that's one of the rules we have at Elements. When the kids are training, do
Yeah.
not get involved. We will have our meetings separately. We meet very regularly with the parents and we
Very
discuss,
cool.
what they do with the parents. And like, there's different parents, like I have this one parent, he basically entrusted his two boys to me and he said, look, whatever you think is right, whatever you want to do, I'm going to follow the way. Then we
Nice.
have other parents where, again, this is just different, not
Sure.
better or worse.
Absolutely.
They basically come up to and they say, hey, I want my kid to do this tournament, this tournament, this tournament. Can you
Mm.
please prepare them accordingly? You know?
Mm.
So yeah, this current generation of parents are fantastic. They are very invested, sometimes too invested, and we deal with
Yeah.
them. But
Yes.
yeah, I would say we're definitely there or getting there.
It's exciting to hear. Like, and with me, there's a difference between an excited, invested parent naturally in their child and a black belt parent. Like, because let's say you have a child, right, and you're a black belt, but let's say you give them to another black belt to teach them, because sometimes it's not so easy to teach your own child. Speaking from firsthand experience, like with my approach, is jujitsu is not for you. Jiu-jitsu is something that we train, and then you can come if you're a good boy, if you do all your shows. And he's like, please, Baba, I've done everything I want jiu-jitsu. Like, I've played my cards well. But in general, it's different. So imagine yourself as a black belt and then trusting somebody you really trust, maybe one of your coaches in the gym as well, to teach your child jiu-jitsu. I think that dynamic is what led to a lot of the Brazilian champions. That is what led like to Roger Gracie, what led to, because that finesse of knowing and working with the coach, two black belts looking after you as a little 4, 5, 6 year old is terrifying, man.
I mean, that's the word I would use, right? Terrifying.
Mm?
Because, like, for me, like, and I'm not talking myself up, but I was always like in Bahrain, I was kind of outgrowing the jiu-jitsu scene there. So I
Okay.
had to seek further training in Brazil. But, this next generation, that's not going to be an issue. You're
Yes.
born into a scene where there's all of these established pioneers and instructors and black
Hmm.
belts, and You know, like it must. I don't know what that feels like because it could be a lot of pressure. You know, where the
That too.
parents are more invested than the kid. That's a possibility.
This is something, again, like the reason I approach it with my son this way, and this is advice to any parents listening, is I'm not basing this on my own genius. I'm taking this on advice of black belts who have kids that ended up running away from jiu-jitsu until their late 20s because of their father being a big name in jiu-jitsu. It has to be a push and pull, and you have to see maybe some kids, it's not the right time. Like for me at 24, for you at 12, some kids, they could become a world champion if they start at 14, but if they start at 8, they'll quit jiu-jitsu. Could be.
Yeah, yeah.
So I guess it's by person. But listen, man, I'm so happy we did this. Well overdue, in my opinion, for somebody like you to be voiced out in the jiu-jitsu community. And I hope to hear a lot more from you. And I want to see Elements out there shining in the spotlight, because what you're doing is much needed. And man, as soon as this shit's open, I've got so many places I need to travel, but I'm definitely coming to check out Elements.
Oh, you have got to come there, man. Like you're gonna love it. I like again, like
Can't wait.
whenever I start talking about Elements, we need to have like some kind of sign where you're like, okay, Ali, you can stop talking now. But man, like I'm so proud of the work we've done, and I can't wait
Nice.
to have you over.
Sure.
And just like this is awesome. What you're doing is awesome. Like we discussed
Thank
before we
you.
went online. I can't believe that there is a podcast for this. You know,
We got
like
one.
it's like God went and he got all of these portions and he created the perfect podcast catered to Ali Monfaradi, which is
Love
your
it.
podcast.
I love it,
And
brother.
it's super thrilling, and you definitely got the right mindset going on, and I'm just so thrilled to be a part of this. You're
Thank
doing
you.
God's work. That's what I'm saying. You're doing amazing work.
Thank you, man. It for me, it's humbling, and it's something that I don't know. I just feel like jiu-jitsu has given me so much in my life and made me so happy in the Middle East. Like I've torn apart American education, traveling back and forth. I always didn't fit well, and jiu-jitsu just plugged me in, right? And it made me feel so comfortable in my skin, comfortable in my city, made relationships I couldn't imagine. So for me, I just want people, if they're searching online and they find this, to find you, to find Daniel Hilal in Lebanon, to find Rana Qubbaj in Jordan, and whoever, and realize there's cool people. The ice is broken. Just get to know them. Everybody's got an amazing story. Inshallah, man, this is how we grow together. Dude, I don't know what to say. Thank you so much for your time, and it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
The pleasure was all mine. I
Habib.
can't wait to see what's to come with you. Thank you
Yes,
so
inshallah.
much. Thank you for
Habib.
having me. This was really fun. I could go on for another 3 hours, but
And
we all have
we will.
lives.
We will do
Yeah.
more. We will do more episodes together, because I really feel like the future is very bright for you, and I look forward to seeing you succeed even further in competitions. And I can't wait to talk to you when you have a world champion under your name and under Elements, because I feel like that's inshallah coming in the future. But we'll see you
I
there.
hope I hope that that happens sooner than later. So
Yes, it will. It will.
fingers
I believe in
crossed.
you. I believe in you. Hang in there. YouTube, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. Much love. You had Kleber de Brito was mentioning that he's here to talk to you, to support Ali Casca Grossa. I just some of the messages. Ahmed Abdullah, thank you so much. And Jiu Jitsu Alexandre, one of the top refs here. Ahmed Abdullah was also supporting Tom Kennedy. A lot of people showing love for you on chat, man. So
Awesome. Thank you
thank you so
guys.
much, YouTube. I'll catch you guys on the next episode. Be sure to tune in tomorrow. If you are not subscribed to the channel, remember, find that button wherever, click the bell next to it, subscribe so we can get rolling and support all of these incredible people here in the region. Much love to you all. Have a good night. See you tomorrow. Woos.